Konami. Konami. Where you were popular with when you had Metal Gear because of Hideo Kojima, and when Silent Hill was at its peak too. By the time it was, yeah, I'll go into a bit of monologue. Pretty much Metal Gear was fantastic since the first one. I guess Metal Gear, and all the way to Metal Gear Solid 5, and then basically the series stopped there technically when Kojima left, and then they get Metal Gear Survive. Everyone knows how that went. And then Silent Hill was at its peak from Silent Hill 1 all the way to Silent Hill 4, and I guess we can include Silent Hill Shattered Memories. I know it wasn't like. I feel like Silent Hill Shattered Memories is an underrated title, but I think from what I've seen in reviews and what I see in the cutscenes, it looks pretty great. Not scary, but great. And I actually have Silent Hill 2 and Silent Hill 3. Did this game motivate me to play those previous games? Kind of, yeah, but alright. I'm just to let you guys read that disclaimer, but we're not really playing the game, so let's see if it'll kind of do like The Last of Us Part 2. Yep, there we go. Okay, well, and guys, forewarned, as pretty much good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time zone you're in. Well, this is not a walkthrough, and this is certainly not a playthrough, so you guessed it, as I love to say in my verdict videos, welcome to Silent Hill, the short message, but this is the verdict, or you could also call it a review, and this is where I give my complete thoughts as best as I can, but really, if you really want to kind of have a good grasp of this game, or kind of a full picture of what this game is about, I would say go ahead and check it out. So, let's pretty much for any new or returning subscribers or viewers, my format for any games that I completely finish, whatever the game is, I basically give it a score out of 10. That's my normal process, the first step. And basically the second step is I talk about the negative first. I like to talk about the negative first, unless the game is just like, to me, it's just complete perfection, or it's flawless. Then I'm not going to give it a negative, and that's pretty much it. So we do the negative first, then we talk about the positive, and then I gush about it, especially the game I freaking liked. And then the third step is, once I do my verdict video, then after doing my usual spill, then I talk about what's going to be the schedule, or if this is going to be a playlist that I just started with, and there's more things to come. Then I talk about what is going to be on this playlist going forward. And then also, after discussing that briefly, then I'll talk about what's going to be the schedule going forward too, just after finishing this game. Would you believe that this game took me close to 5 to 6 hours? It was the last sequence. I'm not ashamed to admit it. It was that last cat and mouse sequence. I didn't know what the heck to do. And it annoyed me so much. But that's going to be one of my negatives. So, before I start ranting, let's talk about what I would give this game. A 5 out of 10. I really wanted to give it honestly, I wanted to give this like a 3 or a 4. I think a 5 is pretty generous for this game, for what the developers clearly they didn't have the budget for it. And I could tell that they didn't have the budget for it. And that's completely okay. I think it's pretty generous. No, absolutely not. I don't think this game deserves like an 8. I don't think it absolutely doesn't deserve an 8. It does not deserve anything higher than a 5. I'm going to tell you guys straight up. It's free to play, so go ahead and check it out. I would not buy it. Luckily, you don't have to buy it. It's free to play, obviously. Yeah, I wouldn't, even if it was not free to play, I wouldn't buy this game. I'm sorry. I'm just giving you a heads up. Just watch my walkthrough, playthrough, or someone else's too. But, of course, you can check mine's out. But, it's not worth it. To me, the game itself is not worth it. So I'll explain what's the negative, and I'll explain why I gave it a 5 out of 10. I think it's pretty appropriate. Okay, so for my note taking for what was the negative about the game, I wouldn't say the writing is like horrible, but it is kind of, it's not strong. The writing is weak. I'll elaborate a little bit. When basically, when the dialogue or when we're listening to the characters just outside of the text messages, collectibles, and the flashbacks, I feel like the dialogue is just too obvious of where the plot twist is going to be heading. Everything we... Actually, let me turn down the volume a little bit, even though Akira's music's fantastic, that's one thing. Man, Akira's music is too fantastic. But anyway, let's just start with the negative. I just felt like, in terms when the characters were talking, it just felt, yes, it was obvious that Maya was dead. Yes, we knew Anita had something to do with, basically, Maya. It just doesn't help that the actress, or I guess the actresses, for all the characters, it just felt like this was their first time acting. So, you want to believe their plight and all the trauma they're going through, and you do, but that will be in my... I'll say that for the positive, but when basically the characters are going through some really internal demons, really traumatic stuff, it's kind of... it's like too restrained. Like, when... case in point, Anita kind of going through... Yeah, I'll say that for the positive. But in terms of the negative, when it was just like trying to get to point A to point B, when Anita's just talking about her blight, you feel for her. But the writing is just... it's just too obvious where the plot twist and the story is going. It kind of got a little, I hate to say it, kind of predictable of where the story was going. I kind of guessed Maya was already dead before the first chapter ended. And it didn't help with the writing just kind of telling us the complete obvious. Like, the writer was just like, Maya's dead. Maya's dead. You can hear me punching my fist on my knee, but Maya's dead. Maya's dead. Yeah, but it doesn't help that the dialogue was just like, it felt wasted. Compared to, like, the previous games that I know that they actually had some good writing. Silent Hill 2 is not the best writing, but it had some pretty solid voice acting. And Silent Hill 3 also had some solid, some solid acting too. I don't know what Silent Hill 4's, like, writing was, but Silent Hill has proved they had some pretty strong writing. So, I mean, yeah, some of their writing is goofy, but some of their writings are strong. So I can't... it's kind of odd when the writing is not up to par. It felt kind of off. I'm not going to diss the voice acting because these actresses, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt that they're pretty new. They probably haven't done acting, or this is probably one of their first time to do this. So I'm not dissing them. I'm dissing the writing. I just think it could have been stronger, and that's not like me to bring up writing. Or more specifically, it's not like me to bring up writing that's bad. It was bad. There was just not any quotable lines, and it just kind of like, we were dealing with it, and it kind of sucks. I just, yeah, weak writing. I think that's pretty fitting for that. Okay, so the main story. I know me and my friend were talking about it. He think the story was interesting. I know he didn't finish the game, and I completely understand. The main story is not the interesting, or more specifically, the main story to get to basically the main story to find out what Maya is trying to show Anita, the journey to get there. I would be invested if the story got me invested, and I'll explain why. It's because I kind of blame the developers on this. The story is just too obvious of where it's going. Unlike I've seen Silent Hill in their previous games, the story had a clear direction of where they were going. We knew from point A to point B of why this character's doing it, and then there was some complexity. Silent Hill 2 is pretty much a perfect example of where the protagonist had some is very complex. He had some pretty strong motivations to going from point A to point B. This girl, yeah, we get where she's coming from, but it doesn't help from the very beginning. It like, I don't know, like 10 to 20 minutes. You know where the story's going. You know how it's going to end. You know, and that's not a great story. That's not a story that will get me invested. It will not, because you already guess where the plot is going in the first 10 to 20 minutes. And then pretty much when you get to the next chapter and the last chapter, you know where it's going. Because they literally repeat the same bloody thing from the first chapter. It's basically, oh, Anita, and I'm gonna just pretty much tell you the obvious. It's sad. It's sad when Anita commits suicide. Absolutely. Absolutely, it's sad. But in terms of the game developers, they just repeat the same thing over and over and over again, and we see where the plot twists are coming. We know how the story's gonna end from a mile away, and that's not the fault in its game. It's the game developers. They clearly just didn't have the budget to do a solid story. Yeah, the story was just not the greatest. I will admit on that. I kind of checked out. I checked out when we got to the final chase sequence. But I'll say what I think about the themes and the symbolism. But the story was trash. I will admit. Sorry to say that, but the story was trash. In terms of just like being strictly on the game, the story was trash. I will say that. Just like the main story in itself, by the story itself. Take the story out, I think the symbolism and themes are great. But because there is a story, I just was not invested. I hate to say it, I just wasn't invested. Gosh, I don't know why. I tried. I did try. I absolutely tried. I just was not invested in the main story. Sorry. Well, I'm going to be honest. But this is kind of my verdict and review. So that's one of the other negatives. And I can't deny, and it's not... It's because, yeah, I probably suck, but the cat and mouse sequences are frustrating and uninspiring. I mean, PT, it's clearly... But that'll be my next negative. But the cat and mouse sequences with the monsters from every freaking chapter, it's the same exact thing, but they do tweak it a little bit. They would be interesting. But you know why they're not interesting and why they're just frustrating? Last sequence is a perfect example. The game is not clear that you have to collect 5 collectibles to progress to the end of the level. That's just bad game design, as I completely said in my last part. I don't like it. I really don't like it. In fact, it makes the cat and mouse chase sequence a chore. It's like a meandering chore. And then you're ready to get done with the game because it wasted so much of your time just trying to get through this sequence. That's not clear of what you're trying to collect. It frustrated me. I got killed so many times. Well, not like a whole lot, but I got killed so many times from that final sequence because the game wasn't clear. And then by the time I got to the end, I was annoyed. I was absolutely annoyed and pissed off that I had to go through this from the beginning. I felt for Anita, absolutely. Yeah, I think she went through a whole lot that no sane person should go through. But that chase sequence was trash, that final sequence. Now, the first sequence, yeah, it's effective. It really sets the tone of where this game is going. I will not diss the first sequence because I think it was effective because we didn't know how the monster were actually going to be set up. I knew there were going to be monsters, but I think the first sequence did a great job of setting what you're going to be facing. But the next sequence, the second sequence, and the third sequence, no, they're pretty crap, if I can be honest. They're very crap. I just kind of wish that there wasn't a chase sequence on every freaking chapter. In fact, I kind of wish they just did one and just did what they did with the bag thing, or just there's no jump scares. Those guys just showing up, those mannequins, those that one got me. That mannequin went. I kind of wish those were moments like that. There was clearly potential to do those type of jump scares, or just kind of like psychological dread, like I mentioned throughout. I think the psychological dread was absolutely great, but they didn't. They sadly didn't focus on that. They just focused on a chase sequence and kind of really subverted and kind of ruined the Silent Hill experience that I was having. I was very much annoyed, and just the fact that it just became repetitive and predictable with those sequences, yeah, it's such a detriment to what they could have had. So yeah, that was a major negative that really just knocked some points away from the score that I do out of 10. It was a reason why I gave it a 5, and jeez. I don't, yeah, that last chase sequence frustrated me so much, I don't want to play the game again, because I was so frustrated about it. But that's okay, I can just pretty much rewatch these, walk through, play through at my own time, same as you guys. Yeah, chase sequence sucked. Except for that first one. I'll give it that. Okay. The next negative, and I really had to think about this one, but I think I think it was a pretty good, legit point. It's trying to be like PT. Silent Hill, the short message, is trying to be like freaking PT. We all know PT for the PS4 before it got removed. I don't know how we can get it. Can you get PT anymore? I have to look online. I'm curious if... I think it's just been pulled. Like, you just literally just can't get it. Just anywhere. Yeah, PT was one of those demos that was just so fantastic. You know why? Because they took its time to breathe. It made you unsettled. The jump scares were not just jump scares. They were just like... They were freaky. Because there wasn't any jump scares as much. Or just a few. Whatever horror they had, it was just like... Yeah, it was Japanese horror. Where they don't use jump scares. They just kind of like... very, very carefully get in your face, but effectively. Or they're just like, it's just really effective. Japanese horror doesn't rely on jump scares. They rely on the atmosphere to freak you out. Just from like a nail dropping on the floor to freak you out. Sound effects to freak you out. Which Silent Hill, the short message, was trying to do at the beginning, but they kept they kept subverting their horror aspect for the chase sequences, or just like, I don't know how to describe it. They were trying so hard to be like PT, especially when we get to Anita's kind of like time loop, or the loop every time she goes to basically open another open door for her traumatic mom, or her psycho mom. Yeah, it was trying to take inspiration for PT and try to do it from the beginning. It's just not good. It's not PT, and it should not try to act like PT. How long have I been going on? I didn't know I was going to be focused on the negative this much, but yeah, Silent Hill, the short message kind of like irritated me in terms of the negative. That's not good. So like I said, it was trying to basically be a copy and paste PT, but they couldn't sell me on the PT stuff. There's a reason why everyone freaking loves PT. Because it was so fresh with the time loop. The time loop was fantastic. The horror is not really any jump scares. It's actual genuine horror. Like, actual genuine horror. This one was just psychological horror. Nothing wrong with that. But it was trying to be like PT. You're not PT. Stop trying to act like PT. That's all I'm saying. And when it was trying to act like PT, its influences and inspiration just fell flat on its face. It wasn't great, and I could tell how hard they were trying to get some PT influences. It wasn't great. It wasn't solid. And the developers know they didn't have the budget to be like PT. So they need to stop all that. So, yeah. That was one of no, one. That was another negative. I will give it that. Okay, so the last negative I had And it's not. I didn't think I was going to put this in negative, but I couldn't help it. So, it's not scary. Like, in the normal sense, like, in just like horrors, like a general horror, it's not scary. In terms of the psychological horror, it's still not scary. And I know that's probably a cop out that saying the game is not scary. Oh my gosh, join the club of other horror games. But the game is not scary. I mean, the first sequence with the twitchy monster, which I guess it's the same monster every time, sadly, it's just like, that's effective in terms of that. That's tense, but it's not scary. You know how many scary sequences we get? Just one. It's the bag creatures, or those mannequins that you see at the beginning, and then you essentially have to turn your back to look at something, and then you see a bunch of them. That was freaky. I wish we had more moments like that. Otherwise, the game is kind of not scary. It makes you tense. There's some wild psychological, like, it's definitely psychologically draining. Not psychologically draining. Psychologically, like, you just feel uneasy throughout the entire first chapter. That's why the first chapter was my favorite, because the sense of unknown, you don't know where it's going, and then you find out that Maya died before that. That was kind of like, you saw her coming from a mile away, but that's kind of why the first chapter was effective. By the time we get to the second chapter and onward, it does kind of become very less scary. First chapter was kind of like tense and unnerving, but nothing scary. Yeah, I mean, that's not really a major nitpick, but I had to take a few points from that, because I was like, you're a Silent Hill series, so that's kind of making me a little biased. I mean, you're supposed to be scary because of your previous games, and we have seen you be scary, but you weren't scary in this one. In fact, maybe the text message is what made it scary, because we have flashlight. But the previous ones, you have flashlight too. Either way, that's kind of one thing I'm gonna have to kind of get on to about it. So that's the negative. I can't believe we're at 22 minutes, but I had a lot to say about the negative on that. That's not like me. I like to be fair. You guys know me. I like to give games some pretty positive reviews, especially if the developers put some love and care into it. I respect some of the developers. I do. I really do. I like to give, like, some developers benefit of the doubt, or they actually did freaking try. They tried, and we know they all try. I'm not the only gamer who is pretty much praising the game. The rave reviews, or pretty much a universal acclaim for some games, absolutely, they get some solid scores. This one, I can see why it's not getting the best scores, or just getting some average, or getting some mixed reviews, or just not getting any scores at all. So yeah, you know the game is not the greatest if I'm giving it a low score. And I don't give games a lot of low scores unless it's total crap. This is not the greatest game, but that's kind of over my mini rant. Now let's talk about the positive. And yeah, I can actually. This one will be short, oddly. Alright, first acknowledgement. I will admit, the monster design, especially the twitchy monster, I think I like that design. Unless it was pretty much the design was different for each enemy encounter. But yeah, the twitchy monster, when it's the monster design, was fantastic. I think it was really well done. For the short time that I saw it, yeah, I don't think the graphics were not great. It was not great. In terms of the technical sense, no. But in terms of the monster design for that one, and yeah, the monster designs for the second and third chase sequence were actually well done too. I think the first sequence just stuck with me more, especially if it didn't reveal what we saw for the second or third encounter. But yeah, the monster design, I will give them that. It was like appropriately creepy and disturbing, and I kind of actually enjoyed that. That's one of the positives. And it really fit the kind of like tone of like, this is a girl going through some serious trauma, so of course the monsters are going to be looking freaking creepy. Yeah, so I'll give it that one positive. Well, I'll give it that positive. Now, moving on. This is kind of pertaining to the first chapter. The second positive I have is the atmosphere is great. Silent Hill is known for excellent atmosphere. Look at Silent Hill 1, the very first one. I enjoyed the atmosphere of this one. From pretty much as we stepped out of that loop for the very first sequence, or just the very first few minutes, I knew that this environment was going to be just, it had something psychologically unnerving about it. And that's why I like the first chapter so much, as I was talking about the negative. The atmosphere just felt very intense, unnerving, like something, you heard different sound effects all the time, and I thought that was effective. I was like, hey, hello? And I was like, okay, I've seen this horror moment before. What are we gonna do right now? That's what I mean. The atmosphere just felt so intense because you didn't know what was going to happen. Anything just like a drop in a nail, you just like, okay, what's behind the corner? I just thought that was pretty effective in terms of the atmosphere. Whether Anita's outside or definitely inside the apartment, it just felt, or is it a complex? It just felt like the atmosphere had some very love and care from the developers to just make it feel like it felt lived in, but it felt like there is like something very, very dangerous in there, and you're just wanting to get out of bats, or just get out of Dodge. I just thought that it was very well done, especially in the first chapter, so I'll give it that other positive too. Third positive. Say what you will about the story. I don't think anyone's gonna be like 100% on the story, but you can't deny that the symbolism and themes are very strong. The themes about bullying, self-harm, suicide. What else did they acknowledge in that disclaimer? Well, anyway, I've seen other games that tackle these taboo subjects in very, very introspective ways. Very, very, very interesting, and how do I describe it? Really, really seriously in terms of the taboo, or just they tackle these taboo subjects in terms of this, in a very kind of like, I never thought about it that way. Silent Hill, the short message, did the same thing. It wasn't the best in terms of introspection, and it's because it was held back by the main story telling you the obvious signs and the plot twist. But when we really focus on the themes, pretty much trauma, bullying, suicide, self-harm, oh yes, the game gets very real. Especially when we get to Anita's past about her brother being killed, stuck in a refrigerator. Well, spoiler alerts, but it's in my walkthrough playthrough. If you're watching the verdict video, well, obviously I'm going to talk about spoilers. But yeah, from Anita's very tragic backstory, or just learn about Amelia's, what her home life is, or just the bullying that basically Maya and she had to put on a strong front to deal with these bullies. All these girls are broken and traumatized to a very depressing degree, and that's where the symbolism, and it even shows in the collectibles too. I think they were pretty much like, they get preachy in terms of suicide. I will say, because of the main story, it does get preachy. But when basically we're talking about symbolism, the themes, I think the game is strongest for that. I think the themes and the symbolisms, especially in the flashbacks, even though that's a little bit on the nose too, but basically, perfect case, perfect example. Anita's going through the school during the second horror sequence, and she's getting shoes thrown at her, and they're called her sluts and whore, and just very horrible stuff. I felt like those moments were effective because they really symbolize or emphasize on the theme of bullying. And then that bathtub scene where basically it's a bloody tub and the scratch marks on Anita, yeah, it's just some really, really heavy stuff. I've seen games, like I said, I've seen games that tackle these taboo stuff with, I wouldn't say like with grace, because talking about this is never, it's not the easiest thing. And the fact that Silent Hill had a disclaimer before that, even though you don't see her cutting herself, you look like she's about to, it just really kind of does like, yes, it showed it and it did tell us, but yeah, it was some heavy stuff, and I don't think this is something that people should ignore. They should ignore this stuff. This is a serious stuff that we really should talk about in like society and just going forward. It's serious stuff, and I will give them that. I felt like the love and care in terms of that, and that's where it helped me kind of like, okay, I could deal with that. They're really addressing some serious topics, some taboo stuff. That's kind of why I am giving it a 5, because of that. The symbolism and themes were really strong. The developers seemed like they really did care about what they wanted to put in the game, what they wanted to really discuss about it. I could tell. Yeah, I will give them regard. I will give them praise and very. I'll give them like, hey, they had stones to talk about this type of stuff. It's not easy to talk about suicide, self-harm, bullying, and trauma. Trauma, everyone can talk about, but suicide and self-harm, that's a that's a taboo and very controversial topic to talk about. It's not an easy topic, but hey, I'll give them that. I think it really elevated their game to be. It elevated their game. It didn't make it perfect, but it made it that I was invested to go through the end. Yeah, I think that's pretty strong. Okay, so pretty much the next to last positive, of course, I gotta acknowledge Akira. Akira's music is always fantastic. It is one of the also the other highlights too. Pretty much from the opening menu to all the way to the end. Akira's music never lets up. From the chase horror sequence too. It's that right amount of balance of, yes, I need to get to the exit. Yes, this thing is trying to kill me. Akira's music is moody. It fits every scene. It's fantastic. It never lets up at all. Even when it's a very quiet moment, his music makes you feel still unnerved, like you're in another world, but it's an Akira flavor. Yes, I am biased, and yes, I'm a fan of Akira's music, absolutely, since Silent Hill and Shadows of the Dam, and I definitely the medium. But Silent Hill is Akira's bread and butter. That's where he officially kind of got his start. I feel like he did games before this, but let's face it, we would not know who Akira is without Silent Hill. Silent Hill is his bread and butter, and it really shows. You could tell that he had a personal, intimate interest to do this, pretty much the soundtrack for this game, and it shows. Yeah, pretty much Akira. If you're gonna have a Silent game, you're gonna have a Silent Hill game. Put Akira in it. Akira for the composer any day for any Silent Hill game. So I'm very curious of how his soundtrack will sound in Silent Hill F and Silent Hill 2 remake. I feel like he'll remix the music in Silent Hill 2, but I'm not sure on Silent Hill F. Like I said, Akira is a freaking national treasure of like horror music. Put him in a lot of horror game music. He's good at it. He's great. He's excellent in it. That's all I gotta say. Oh yes, I know I'm biased for Akira in a positive way. Sue me. Anyway, moving on. And the last positive about it was this under 30 minutes. Darn, it wasn't under 30 minutes, but that's okay. I will say this, even though the main story it didn't like stick with me, and it didn't leave a lasting impression. I will say the ending is fitting. It's not the best, but it is fitting. That's the last positive. I felt like even though the story just it didn't have the budget. It did not like. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, I feel so fulfilled after doing Anita's journey. I didn't think Anita's main story journey was the most interesting. The symbolism and themes definitely felt earned. It felt earned. And it was her just wanting to accept people's help and being accepted. I think the ending message, compared to what we got from the beginning, I think it was a strong start in terms of that, but it was just held back for the journey to get from point A to point B. The main story was just not the greatest. But when we're talking about the themes and symbolism, I felt like it had a neat little bow of this girl just overcoming her trauma and then ready to move on to a new future. say what you will, I think that's a very inspiring ending. Just for anyone who's been going through some pretty serious stuff like this. Yeah, I think it was fitting. It wasn't the best ending, I will not admit. There are definitely more better endings in this game, but I just think there's no other way this game could have ended way. So I will give it that. I think it was a fitting ending. And that's it, guys. That sums it up. So yeah, 5 out of 10. I think it's very appropriate. I think this game had potential. I just think that they just put the game way... They put it out too fast. I think the developers should have took their time. Really make the graphics feel like next gen. This graphics feel like it's something last gen or PS3 era. Except when it's a modular design. It's kind of odd. But yeah, 5 out of 10. I think that's pretty fitting. Sorry if I don't sound enthusiastic to type about this game, but I actually am glad it's over. Not because I enjoyed it, it's just because this was kind of a chore and I knew I was going to finish it. It took a little while. Alright, so here's what's going to be the schedule. I'm going to take a break, that's a fact. But once I take my short break, then we are going to go ahead and do maybe 2 of Tokyo RPG's game. Well, I'll surprise and let you guys know what it is. But that's going to be for the rest of the day. And then, tentatively, I think I'm going to skip Sunday and Monday. And then just do streaming on Tuesday because we got 3 new games coming out. Yeah, I guess we have 3 new games coming out. I'll do 2 videos of that. If I can't finish that Tuesday, then we'll do it Wednesday and finish up the 2 videos. And then we'll take a break and then wait till Friday. And then focus more on Tokyo RPG. Pretty much these upcoming weeks, we're trying to finish majority of these Tokyo RPGs, like I Am Setsuna, Lost Sphere, and also Omnaki. I definitely want to finish I Am Setsuna. That's a fact. That absolutely is a fact. And now for the Silent Hill playlist, going forward, Silent Hill's short message, it's not going to be the only game for the Silent Hill playlist. Whenever it comes out, Silent Hill F is going to be part of the list. Silent Hill 2 Remake, unless we have the original one, and then we can, I guess, play a port of Silent Hill 2 and 3. There's not going to be a port of Silent Hill 4, obviously, unless they do a remake. That also sums it up. Well, there's not going to be a remake of Silent Hill Shattered Memories 2. So, yeah, I guess it's going to be Silent Hill F, Silent Hill 2 Remake, and that's pretty much it. There's no other Silent Hills. So, are they going to cancel the Silent Hill series since this one didn't do well, or they're just going to keep going until they just can't get any more money? Well, that kind of sums it up. Alright, well, it is getting close to 40 minutes, so I think we should end it here. Of course, you can leave that like, comment, or subscribe, as you guys already know, and like I say, have a good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and my ending close, or my closing phrase, because we're doing just a few more videos. Okay, well, I guess stay tuned for more Silent Hill content.